Vandeham Shri Guru.
Many of us who believe in something, we believe in something for sure. That's why we are at IIT. We believe that our education will make us happy, that knowledge makes us happy. We believe in, nature. Chicago is very unpredictable. So there is an innate belief system. And some people like to say we believe there is God. Some people say we don't believe there is God. Now, it really doesn't matter what we believe. It comes down to facts and figures. Is it a fact or not? And that's what makes or breaks an argument. So we'll kind of go through today as a team, not like I'll be speaking and you'll be hearing, but let's think through the whole process. We made a presentation that's it'll be nice if it is more interactive, so stop me whenever you want, ask questions, and let's think through this logically, whether there is something called God or not. So I'll start with a story. So this is Sir Isaac Newton, and that's a prototype of the solar system, a very complicated system made with gears. So you move something, a pulley or something, and they move in a certain order, replicating the original solar system. So I don't know if Newton made this, but Newton had made something very similar for a friend that he had who did not believe in God. So he invited his friend over one day. He unraveled this little solar, made up prototype of the solar system. And his friend asked, "Wow, this is cool. Who made this?" He said, "It just existed. It was there." He said, "No, somebody must have made this. Who made this?" And he said, "Well, it was just there. Randomly happened to be there. Believe me. That's not possible. Come on, don't joke with me. Who built this?" And he said, "Well, this is just a prototype of the real thing. If you don't think this was, not made by somebody, how can you think the real solar system, huge, ginormous system that's perfectly moving in order, could just exist by itself?" So again, that's a point. That's our first point to think about. How can anything exist without somebody making it? The chairs, the tables, they're perfect. They're in certain order. They have certain proportions. Just like that, we see in nature. Every morning the sun rises. Every day, certain phenomenon happens. We call the natural laws. We call the natural organization of things, right? So the idea of chance, really, even though it's a popular idea, it really doesn't hold much water. Why? Why?
I think it does.
Okay, we'll talk about if it does, but let's hear the argument why it doesn't hold any water. Speak out loud.
Oh, talking to me?
No, somebody behind you. No? Okay.
So what's the topic meeting? What's your question?
Chance. Why does chance doesn't hold much water? What happens by chance? For example, we are all here in this classroom. Did we just happen to walk in by chance? We made a choice, right? There are phenomena that happen on a very low scale. So we'll talk about it. I was hoping somebody would say something, but I'll elaborate this idea of chance. So when we look at Lake Michigan, it looks like an ocean. For a person, I've been asked this many times by a lot of people who are visiting Chicago for the first time, doesn't know much about the geography. They say, "Oh, what ocean is this?" I tell them, "No, it's a lake. It's called Lake Michigan." So when you look at it from a larger perspective, then you can see it's a lake. And that requires knowledge. That requires an understanding of a higher perspective. But from a very, very low perspective, it looks like a giant body of water which has no end. You can see the horizon. So here's a story of the elephant and the 6 blind people. Have anybody heard of this story? One person. Okay. So there's the elephant, and there were 6 blind people. and they're trying to figure out what is this creature. So somebody, touching it, feeling the elephant thinks, oh, it's a spear, look at the tusk. Oh, it's a snake, look at the trunk. It's a tree, the legs of the elephant, the rope, the tail, the wall, it's a fan, the ears are so big. So everybody had their own idea of what that elephant is. So the 6 blind men had 6 different opinions. So were they all wrong? No. They were all right. But there is more truth than what they were sharing. So a person with proper vision can come and tell them, each one of you are right, but there is also a whole holistic idea. This elephant has fan-like ears, spear-like tusks, rope-like tail, etc. So for that, it requires certain qualification. And let's see if any of us are qualified today. What does that picture look like? What is that picture?
An old woman and a young girl.
What do you see?
Both of them.
Okay. What do you
Sounds
see?
like a woman looking the other way.
Yeah.
You're seeing the young woman or the old woman?
She looked like I say younger woman.
Younger woman? Okay, how many of us sees a young woman? How many of us sees an old woman?
Right now we are.
Right? So how we perceive truth is very relative because our senses are limited. So with these limited senses, we try to perceive the truth. So actually it's an optical illusion. There is an old woman, there is a young woman, and according to our vision, we are seeing it in a certain way. So with our limited senses, we sometimes try, well, that's our only way to perceive the truth, with our 5 senses, right? That's how we vision, see the window of the world. And when we try to do that, a lot of times, we make mistakes. If not all the time. And we can say, okay, we have these gadgets and technology and this Hubble Space Telescope, this telescope, with which we can see things accurately, but believe it or not, there are issues with those too. There are problems with things because they're extensions of our limited senses. So, real accuracy is hard to come by. And because we make mistakes, we like to believe what we know is right and what everybody else thinks might or might not be right. And that is called illusion. Because we have a lot of faith in our senses, which we know, we have been proved many times, that they're limited. They're not always give us the right answers. But still, we put faith in those. So we come under illusion. And then there's cheating propensity. And what is that? My idea is the right one because I have the loudest voice, or I have the most money, or I have the most power. And so sometimes there is forceful proposition of what somebody thinks is true. And if there are 10 other people who say yes, it becomes a democratic answer. Yes, so this must be true. Now this is not the best way to gain knowledge, especially when we're talking about the Creator, or something beyond our limited senses that we call God. So this elephant example really nicely explains that we are trying in our own ways, and there are many cultures of the world that have beliefs that there's a higher being, there's God, there's even the tribes, they worship some mountain, some waterfall, something. So innately there is this understanding that there is something higher, because we live our lives every day. Not everything is in our control. Some people call it luck. I got lucky. Of course, comes from the Vedic perspective, we call it karma. There is no such thing as luck. There is an action, there is a reaction, which we talked about the past few weeks. But so it is important to understand the high-level perspective. How do you get the high-level perspective? How do you get a high level perspective? How do you get the full picture?
Drugs. I'm not healthy, no.
How do you get a full picture? By knowledge. So in the six blind men and the elephant idea, a person who can see, a person who is in more knowledge than these people can see the truth. So we need a teacher. We need somebody who knows the truth to tell us the truth. And then we can also personally observe, like I talked about the solar system, that was the first story. There is an organization in nature, there are laws of nature, there are the four seasons. All these laws that science comes about. We have all these nice formulas that perfectly work in the certain circumstances. So who made these laws? How can they just randomly exist? For example, in the state of Illinois, or let's say the United States, we drive on the right side of the road. In UK or India, we drive on the left side of the road. Somebody made that law, right? So they're natural laws. And there are very specific laws. There are specific patterns in nature. One of my good friends, he's a monk, and he was walking with a person who believes in chance at randomness. And they were going through it, there were these wild flowers. They had become these beautiful purple, yellow, pink flowers arranged randomly. And he said, chance has a good sense of aesthetics, look at that. Right? So everything, if we look around us, there's so much water stored in the ocean that has a perfect system where it goes up, gets distilled, comes out as rain, as rivers. We have water, we have sunlight, we have everything we need to survive. We have the perfect planet to survive as human beings. If we were a little closer to the sun, we would be burnt. If we were a little farther away, everything would be so cold, we wouldn't survive. So everything is just in perfect order. And it's sustaining us. So, yesterday, or day before yesterday, we were watching this documentary of what happens inside one cell. It's amazing, it's mind-boggling how complicated one cell can be. The ribosomes and the DNA and how they work with each other to self-replicate. It's just a perfect system. And it's happening constantly in our bodies. We don't even realize it. So there is so much happening, and we think that there is nobody behind it. We create a lot of technology, looking at Mother Nature, the concord. When we look at the bird, there is no designer, apparently. Somebody who draws a rose is a designer. But the original rose, no designer, apparently. So, if there is something we're copying, and we're putting our names to it, it's kind of like, when I first came to the US, my undergraduate studies in psychology class, I went to Wikipedia and copy-pasted a few lines. My professor told me, don't do that again, it's called plagiarism. So this is kind of like that. We're taking from nature, we're making everything, copying nature, and then giving it our names, and we are the creators. We are making everything work. It's called plagiarism. We don't give the copyright to the designer, the original designer. So the definition that is given by those that are seers of the truth, the person who can see, not the blind persons, is this: that there is a cause for every cause. And if you go down all the way, the ultimate cause of all causes, that thing or that person or that idea is God. Now one can say, well, starting with the Big Bang. There was a bang, boom, there were all these planets coming out, and we have, voila, the whole universe. So who made that bang happen? Who pulled the plunger? Right? So we should go a little further back, beyond time zero, if there is anything called time zero. So without equal or superior, somebody who's sustaining all this, the Vedic understanding is that God by definition is what? Is there is no equal and there is no superior. If there is any superior, then that would be considered God. Supreme proprietor. Of course. We take wood from the trees, we put a few things together, we call it this mind. But where is that coming from? This cause of all causes. So that cause of all causes is the proprietor. Supreme controller. Does anybody think that they're not being controlled? You're not being controlled?
Not by anything outside of this dimension.
If you drink a lot of water, would you have to go to the bathroom?
But that's in this dimension.
But you're being controlled.
What's this?
You're free.
To an extent. I mean, everybody's being controlled by things in their own dimension. Like this gravity that's pulling you down.
What do you mean by being controlled? Like,
Can we act as God? Can we do whatever we want?
you mean do we have free will?
We have free will,
Okay.
but are we free to do whatever we want? For example, if I want to fly, can I fly?
No. Okay. No. We have constraints.
Yes, we have
limits.
constraints. Yes. Okay.
Talking about God, are you directly pointing toward the spiritual entity of the God, or seeing God in a person or a human? Or
We'll get there. There are aspects of God. So we'll get there. We're getting there. But right now I'm just trying to logically at least point to a direction that what could be God. And then we'll go beyond logic where there is more coming from the natural knowledge system that we have. So there are three ways, according to the Vedas, there are three ways to acquire knowledge. One is called pratyaksha, or sense perception, like I said, through our senses. Then there's anumana, analytical understanding. So if there is fire, there must be smoke. Is that always true? Is there always fire? I lived in Amesbury, and every time there was a fire alarm, the fire people would be telling us it's the okay, I won't name anybody, but there were some people who would be using hairsprays, and that clogs up, and there's a fire alarm, and every time there are like all these fire trucks coming outside. So it's not always true that the analysis part, that if the cause and effect can not always be accurate. So the Vedas talk about shabda, or hearing from a tongue, or the descending system of knowledge that is coming from the Creator. So this is a simple question. Let's say a child says, "Who's my father?" There's two ways to answer this question. One way to answer the question is, okay, let's say I'm 20 years old. My father must be, at least 20 years older than me. So let's find all these people in that population. Okay, if I'm a certain ethnicity, I'll try to find that ethnicity, and then get them all together and do genetic studies and see how much that correlates with my genetic makeup, etc., etc. Try to find a father. What's wrong with that system of finding a father?
extremely inefficient.
Yes, it's extremely inefficient. It's time consuming,
Costly.
resource intensive. And he might have died, who knows? He might go through all this and not find it. So the Vedas say, the easier way to do it is ask the mother. That's the easy way. Because the answers are already given. So there are two processes of receiving knowledge. One is called inductive, one is called deductive. The ascending process, which is the intellectual process, where we observe something and we come to the conclusion, okay, this seems to be how the two things are interacting, and that must be law. And we come up with laws. Yeah, good.
I just had a question. Why should we trust the mother?
Why should we trust the mother? We don't have to. We don't have to. But why should we trust the genetic understanding? Why should we trust the parent that is telling me who's my father?
Because
Oh, it's based off of math and science and reason, things that we know to be
There are proofs.
There
Might be proofs.
might be proofs.
They've worked in the past.
And the answers which comes from a person, it might be the thing which you are explaining about chance.
I don't understand.
Initially, in the first slide, you were explaining about the chance. Right? The answers which come from people, they might be true or might not be true.
That's true for machines too. Have you never had wrong readings in your machines?
We had.
Okay. Do you know how much percentage of genetic studies are accurate? Carbon dating is accurate? Or any kind of anything you look into, it has machines have faults, just like because they are extensions of our imperfect senses. But hopefully, our mother won't lie to us, and that's the best source because she knows who the father is. So that's better. It might not be true also, but it's a better source than going through all this long experiments and then trying to find an answer through, which might not even, like I said, the father might have been dead. So the Vedas give two processes. Okay, so one is the ascetic process where we observe things and come to conclusions, and maybe this and maybe this, and maybe there is a law, and hey, it works for such and such circumstances, we can repeat it. Okay, it's great. The second thing is, it's coming from a disciplic succession. In the Vedic system, there are teachers and students, teachers and students, teachers and students. So that's how knowledge comes down. So that's another way to receive it. So one is trying to understand the truth by one's own endeavor and sometimes speculation. The other one is learning the truth by accepting an authority or inquiring. And it's not like accepting dogmatic in a dogmatic way. When we receive, for example, in IIT classes, when we receive education, we ask questions in class. So, in the Vedas, practically all our books are questions and answers, questions and answers. Our Bhagavad Gita is nothing but Q&A. So questioning actually, the Vedas say that questioning is what makes us humans. Animals don't question life. Humans do. And so when we start questioning, that's when we start our human life. And so we hear something from the authority, we try it out. There is a hypothesis, let's say. We try it out, we apply it, there is experiment. And then there's observation, if it is right or wrong. And guess what? For 5,000 years, there are many cases where people have experienced the same thing. Whatever is given in the milestones, it correlates with their lives. And one comes to accept, okay, this works. The litmus test is, am I happier? Am I less stressed? Am I less envious? Is there a transformation in my heart? So in our system, it's coming from the scriptures. Now one might say, scriptures, oh, they have been translated so many times and people's interpretations and this, that, they can never be right. Yeah, that's true. There are so many scriptures all over the world that have been misinterpreted and things just go wrong from one word taken out of context, one sentence. It's true. So why follow scriptures? Why follow scriptures, Nirmal? I'm just joking. You just walked in. Because in the Vedic system, like I said, there's a very proper method of keeping the truth intact. Not saying that it has not been tinkered with, but there's a system. For example, there are Nike shoes that are original, there are Rolex watches that are original, and then there are the Chinese versions that are, looks exactly like it but not quite it. So like that, there are many different variations of the scriptures. But believe it or not, there does exist original scriptures that are restored as they are. And one who follows those, one can see the changes that one has in one's life, one's experience of living with others, one's perception of reality. So it comes down from what we call, Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita, that just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So we study our engineering or whatever we are learning a requirement to be a teacher at IIT is you have to have a PhD. I mean, of course, there are TAs, but professors have to have PhDs. Those who know the subject matter thoroughly. When we were brushing our teeth, when we were little kids, our mother had to teach us that. Right? Somebody had to teach us how to walk. So the simplest things in lives have to be taught. But when it comes to spiritual life or thinking about God, we can figure it out ourselves, even though it's way beyond our intelligence. The universe, this is one universe. There are so many universes. It is way beyond our what we can fathom with our limited intelligence. But yet we think we can. We cannot see what's beyond this wall. But we can measure things that are, way, way, way bigger than our planet. Of course, there is truth to it. But thinking that we have everything in accuracy and there is no God, there is no creator to all this, there is nothing beyond what we can perceive with our limited senses. I mean, come on, radio waves, we cannot perceive that with our limited senses. Okay, there are gadgets, there are extensions. What about the mind? What about love? What about intelligence? Do those things don't exist? Does intelligence exist? Hopefully. Does the mind exist?
It does.
So in the past weeks we talked about matter, the gross matter and subtle matter. And we talked about something subtler, the soul, something that is not material, spiritual in nature. So I'm not going to repeat all those, but there are lectures that are on our Facebook page. You can check them out. So here is, okay, I'll skip this one. Get to the point of the aspects of God as described in the Vedic literature. The learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. So there are three aspects to God. Brahman, that's the aspect which is all-pervading. It's a higher energy. Some people call it the universe, or the super intelligence, whatever one might say. That's referred to as Brahman. Something that is governing all laws of nature, affecting, influencing everything we see around us. Then there is something called Paramatma, which is super soul. So there is soul, there is us, then there is super soul. There's an aspect of God which is in every atom and which is in every living entity. The inner voice that's inspiring, that's giving us intelligence, giving us memory and forgetfulness. Okay, so we'll go through them one by one. So Brahman is all-pervading, abstract, formless, featureless aspect of God. Bhagavad Gita says, by me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. This is Krishna speaking, first person singular. Paramatma. So when we talk about karma, we talked about karma in the past lectures. So who takes notes what we're doing? Who witnesses the karma? That's Paramatma. It's a super soul. He provides memory, intelligence, and forgetfulness. He's a witness person, and he sanctions. Yes, he does sanction all the good and bad activities that we do, because we have free will, and that is not tinkered with. We can choose to do what we want to do within our karmic pile. And for us to act with material nature, we are spiritual beings. So for us to act with material nature, there needs to be a buffer system. Just like when we hit the print button. Control P, the paper comes out, printed. There's a buffer where there's a memory that lets us, the human interface, interact with the computer memory and comes out an output. So he acts as that interface between the spiritual being and the material covering of this body. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, who is known as the super soul. And then finally there is the aspect of Satchidananda, eternal, cognizant, and blissful. Bhagavan, this is the complete personality of God, which has form, has personality, has qualities, has opulence, is the supreme creator, the supreme enjoyer, the supreme controller. And he does not have a long beard. He's very, very youthful. So the Bhagavatam describes who God is in great details. So this form is not a material form. It's a spiritual form. The form is unlimited. But nevertheless, there is a form. Otherwise, we could not have form. There has to be a blueprint from which we have come. Right? So before, let's say, this is what I do. I make products as a profession. So initially, it's in the mind where the product is first built. And then slowly, that mind, I write it down, what's called a plan, and then it's built in a 3D prototyping machine, and then it's mass produced. So like that, the form that we have exists in some other place. And so we are replicas of that form. And same way, the personality, the desires, the qualities, everything we see around us has a source. Remember the definition? Source of all sources. Cause of all causes. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the eternal, is the supreme God. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin. And he is the prime cause of all causes. So the Vedas call the word of God is called Krishna. Somebody can say Allah or God or whatever language, whatever way. Allah means almighty. Krishna is all attractive. But nevertheless, it's a recognition of a higher being. A person. If God was not a person, what would be the point of prayers or reciprocation? It is an automated system. Nevertheless, there is also reciprocation. Finally, this is called the 6 opulences. So the word Krishna means all attractive. So one who has these things, even one of them, is very, very attractive. Somebody is very strong. Somebody is very wealthy. Might be very ugly, but wealthy. There will be a lot of women around that person. If somebody is very knowledgeable, very attractive. Somebody has beauty, of course, we know that. Renunciation, yes, because more renounced, they attract a lot of crowds, especially in India. They make a lot of money. Whether they are renounced or not, if they look like they're renounced, they'll make a lot of money. So even if one has one of these qualities, one is attractive. So what of the person who has everything in fullness? So such a person is called Krishna, or all attractive. And the Vedas describe it as a person who has devotees, who has people he exchanges loving relationships with, who's also sustaining and maintaining the universes, material creation and spiritual creation, who has family, who reciprocates with different individuals in different moods, in different relationships. Where else would our relationships come from? And ending with, he's a supreme enjoyer. And he's always happy. And because we are parts of Krishna, or part of God, we are always striving for happiness. And finding happiness temporarily here and there. So that is a Vedic perspective of what or who is God. I'm ready for the bullets, the questions. We'll talk.
Yeah. Keep my mouth shut.
Any questions? Yeah.
So, I'm a Muslim, so I believe in God. And when I come here, I imagine maybe there is some more diversity. For example, there are some other people that don't believe in God. And I can hear their reasoning and their, I don't know, their logic. So, and the interesting point is that the God, your reasoning is too close to our reasoning. And we are studying school, we have some religious studies, and we learn pretty similar reasoning you have. But when you come to somebody who don't believe in God, sometimes you can't argue with him. I mean,
You can't.
You can't argue with him. They have their own reasoning. For example, speaking about the Big Bang, I have always this question to ask them. Okay, you said the Big Bang, and what's beyond that? So what was before that? And they simply say, we don't know what was before that, but we know until that incident, and maybe some years later we find out what was before that, and you also don't know what was before that, so you can't just put a name on it and say it's God. So when you don't know anything about things, you may or may not put a name on it. So, I mean, I completely understand if some person here don't believe in God, and without by hearing the things would not be a believer in God. So I don't know. I just wanted to go.
This is not. I'm not trying to convince somebody to believe in God. I'm representing certain ideas so that we can at least start thinking about it. If somebody is told, let's say a child in first grade is told that there is something called an electron, which is wave-particle duality. It is a wave, it's also a particle. The child will be like, okay, doesn't make sense to me, but whatever, right? But as the child grows, goes to school, slowly over time, with enough knowledge, it makes sense. So like that, there are many things that at a preliminary stage is hard to fathom or understand. And one might be very knowledgeable in one subject matter and not in something else. But the cheating propensity that we talked about, with our limited senses, and we make mistakes, yet we think we know everything, or whatever we think is right, what the other person thinks is wrong. So when that happens, there is no room for discussion. Right? So here, this is the forum to discuss, to really think about it in a way. And one might say, can you show me God? The answer is yes, you can see God. It's a fact. Now, can you see Obama? No. You cannot even get an appointment with a simple person who's a normal human being. He was a professor at the University of Chicago. He's now the President of the United States. You cannot get an appointment with him. And here we're talking about the creator of millions and millions of universes. So yes, there's a process to it. And that process has been given by many scriptures in the world. And I'm here talking about the Vedic process, with which you can perceive God, you can experience God, you can see God face to face, just like I'm seeing you. And then it becomes clear, but one has to be open-minded to take the first step, to even delve into that subject matter. Because we think on our own speculation we can understand certain things. And if we cannot fathom it, then it doesn't exist. And that is not right. That is not, it's not giving it a fair chance. So trying to make somebody convince them just by a 25-minute, half an hour presentation is not going to work like that. But at least we can question life. We can question why things happen, how things happen, and the answers are there. And when we apply it, so there is a place called Krishna House on 3135 South Michigan Avenue, where a few of us live there, and we live a life based on the Vedas. It's very wonderful. And you know what? We have a very healthy lifestyle. We eat wonderfully, we have a lot of fun, and everything is centered around God. And everybody perceives a very different form of happiness, different kind of energy, a different kind of life that is beyond stress, beyond everything that we feel every day. There's a purpose to living. There is a whole degree of happiness that is not otherwise experienced. So one of the professors at IIT, I'm working with her to do a case study to compare students outside, students inside Krishna house, and the difference that it makes to a person's quality of life. And that's a litmus test. We can keep on going on fighting for hours and hours and hours. You know, one might say, I believe in God, one might say, I don't believe in God. But hey, end of the day, who's more happy? End of the day, who's ready to die peacefully? At the time of death, that's the biggest examination, right? Life is a preparation, death is an examination. That's the ultimate time. One time, one of our teachers, he was asked by somebody in the audience, what if at the time of death you find out there is no God? He said, well, and if at the time of death I find out there is no God, okay, at least I'll lead a very happy life, a good life. And then he asked the other person, what if at the time of death you find out there is God? You wasted the entire life doing things, finding happiness in the wrong places. Okay, any other questions or statements or comments? Anything? Okay.
That's awesome.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Remind me your name one more time.
My name is John.
John.
Yes. During your presentation, it seemed like you hinted at the design argument, and you
Intelligent design?
not necessarily. Well, not necessarily. Oh, yeah, I guess you could say intelligent design. It depends. But,
Needs intelligence to design.
right.
That depends.
I believe that you may have confused human artifacts with natural phenomena. So you, for example, you use chairs, for example. We know that this chair was designed. But the real reason we know this chair was designed was because with this observation of this chair comes along with the background knowledge. In other words, you know this chair is designed because you already know it's designed because of your background knowledge. We have thousands of examples of chairs being designed, and we already know chairs are designed. So it's not that you're making an observation of a complex object and hypothesizing that it was the product of an intelligent designer or person. But with natural phenomena, you don't already know it's designed. So
Why not? Why do I say
you
we
already
do?
know
The
that
Vedas
the
give
universe is
very
designed.
vivid descriptions of the blueprints of the designs that exist in nature. It talks about 8.2 billion species of life and gives detail of every classification. The inanimate, the animate, the aquatics. There are 400,000 kinds of human beings. We were talking about it last week at the karma theory class. 400,000 kinds of human beings. Because it includes not just this planet, but other planetary systems.
Well, what is the
The book?
entity that you were speaking of that describes this?
The book is called Srimad Bhagavatam.
Oh, okay.
But what if I wrote a book?
What?
What if I wrote a book? Would that make it right?
No.
If it was right.
But there are many things in the book that have been scientifically, if you look at it. For example, we think Galileo talked about the Earth-Big Circle. This book was 5,000 years ago, and it talked about the Earth-Big Circle. It gives dimensions of the universe, dimensions of this planet, dimensions of other planets, and the distances between them, and gives vivid details of the universe. That very much correlates with modern science, what we have come to in the last 200-300 years. This was there 5,000 years ago. So yeah, you might come up with a book, and it might be a nice sci-fi book, but would it correlate? And would it not? See, the thing is, things that we write, it changes. Somebody might come and dispute it and say, Aaron, whatever you wrote, I have a better idea, a better way to explain it. But these books have not changed, and they have not been disproved. They have lived through millennia, and they have been proved right as the time has gone by.
Well, that's just only certain aspects of the book that may have been proven. Like if the book asserts that the earth is spherical, then we have used science to demonstrate that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that other facets of the book are correct, such as that there is a omnipotent creator or what have you. Like all books, whether fiction or non-fiction, have some statements of reality. There's no, even fiction books have, non-fiction books have statements that are real.
So in that case, why do we follow the books that are given in college? They can be real or not.
Well, we can independently, well, these books are just documenting, observations that have been made.
And these books are also documenting observations that have been made by persons. They're not somebody's imagination. They're documentations of people's observations. People who have lived in history.
Susan, but in this case, we don't have any proof. For example, I'm not familiar with your kind of what you follow. Do you call it religion or not? Okay, I'm not familiar with that. But for example, in Islam, we have something that says, okay, there is another world after this world, and what you are doing here are measured and are seen, and you should be careful about your doings and so on and so forth. But there is no proof for that right now. I mean, there's some things that you said this is beyond this world. Do you have any proof of that? For example, you may say, okay, we are living a happier life, but maybe some other people doing some other stuff have a happy life.
Sure.
So, I mean, happiness is not something that we can measure or we can prove, and there are some different things that are effect on being a happy guy or not. Maybe because of we eat some special foods, we do some practices, so these are make us more healthier. I mean, we are healthier, so we are happier. So, do you get my point? There is when we are thinking about the material things, about the mathematics, about something, then we can prove it or we can test it. But there is some things beyond the mathematics, beyond the material things. There are some spiritual things, so we cannot prove them.
So the Vedas, it's a body of knowledge. Veda means knowledge, and so 94% of the Vedas is about material knowledge. It talks about everything from chemistry to biology, even rocket science, 5,000 years ago, which were, by the way, used by the Germans during World War II. So the Vedas talk about very hi-fi scientific technology. And there is the very tiny aspect of the Vedas, which is also very, very large. Like the book I told you about, Srimad Bhagavatam, is 18,000 verses. And our Bhagavad Gita, which is like the Quran, it's 700 verses. So even the 6% that we have, and we have many, many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books just on the spiritual topic. So it's a vast body of knowledge. So the same Veda that's talking about material side that we can tangibly touch and feel and practice it, and we have Vedic doctors called Ayurveda. There is Dhanurveda. There's all kinds of departments of Vedic knowledge, and they're all accurate. There's Vedic mathematics. With that calculator, you can do very complicated mathematical calculations very easily through Vedic math. So if all these things are right, and if the same Vedas are talking about... I'm sorry?
Is there anything wrong between them?
Wrong between them?
For example, you say there is many things that are proven to be right, and there is some kind of complicated things in your book. Is there anything that is not right or proven to be wrong?
Well, the spiritual aspect of things, yes, people question about them.
No, in material things. For example, we have something in Islam, in Quran, that we have some prediction about the future, and some of them are right, and some of them I can't say that's wrong, because the kind of written the book is something that is not mathematical or scientific writing. So everybody can somehow interpret it as he will.
Well, the Vedas also have Bhavishya Puran, which is talking about the future. And by the way, it talks about Jesus Christ in more details than the Bible. It talks about many future events with specific names, mother's name, where he lived, everything. All these details are given, and there are many other things where predictions have been made about the future that are very accurate. It talks about the city, the river around it, the people who would be named what. It's like very detailed. So yeah, there are things like those as well. But I try to not make things very ethereal, rather keep it
No,
down.
but as my case, when somebody try to find something scientific in Quran, I say, oh wait, this is not what Quran come from to learn some scientific things. It's all about the spiritual things.
Yeah, and spiritual things should be scientific as well.
When you put it in scientific things, then, for example, if it come from the Newton area, so maybe you say, okay, this is in my book, and Newton say the same. But when you come in Einstein, then Newton is right. Then how you can compare your
it is difficult. I would agree with you that it is difficult because something spiritual is not perceivable or measurable by material objects and material equipments that we might have. So yes, it is hard to, with our limited senses, to understand certain things. But there still have been some, for example, there was one experiment done at the University of Florida where there were 3 plants in 3 different rooms. And one plant had rap music playing all the time. The other plant had Western classical music. And the other plant had, the chanting of something we chant called the Hare Krishna mantra. They had that. And the plants, they were identical plants. And they were growing very differently. They were reacting to the music. So the plants were showing symptoms of consciousness, which were being affected by the sound vibration. And by the way, the meditation sound had the best results. This plant was the tallest, the most symmetrically grown. The Western classical music one was the second best, and the worst was the rap song. It was growing in a very zigzag kind of way. So it does affect consciousness, and that is the closest you can get to really measuring something from a very material perspective, because it is showing, because spirit affects matter. It's not the other way around. Matter is dead. Spirit is conscious. So when spirit is affected, it's like inside out process. So matter is affected. Then we can perceive the difference. So what you talked about, Quran, is not science, right? The scientific process can be used nevertheless. Just like in science, there is a hypothesis, there's experiment, there's observation. The Bhagavad Gita talks about certain truths. And if you follow those truths, there are milestones where we can come and say, hey, this said if I do this, this will happen. Am I there? Is this happening? Yes. Okay, let's take the next step, the next step, and the next step. So like that, just like in science, when we are in first grade, I don't know if you do an experiment in first grade, okay, maybe 5th grade, we do, at least in India, we used to do these experiments with copper sulfate. We would take a copper rod and do copper plating. Oh, it works. And then we grow up a little bit, our experiments become more complicated. So like that, but our faith grows in science, right? This works, okay. This law must be true. Gravity must be true, because when I use this 9.8, this is the speed, etc. Gravity must be true. This must be true. So we grow in faith, in science. So like that, in spiritual life, we start with the basic building blocks. We take one step. It works. Okay, it said this would happen, this is what's happening. So, but it is on a very individual basis, it's on a personal basis. It's a person who can perceive it. And there are many persons who can perceive the same thing. But because it is personal, there cannot be a meter reading on our heads that says, intelligence gone this much. No, it doesn't work like that. So it's difficult to express to others. Nevertheless, we are not in the business of, like I said, this is not a forum to convince people to believe in God. This is a forum to share our thoughts, indicating in a certain direction. And we can think more about it. And we are all intelligent persons, and we can come to our conclusions. And person who is interested will take steps to seriously pursue a teacher who can guide them with the proper knowledge. And there are bodies of knowledge. One might find interest in the Vedic body of knowledge, one might find interest in the Quran body of knowledge, one might find interest in some other body of knowledge, but there is knowledge available. So one who's sincere would seek it out and try to find the answer. Okay, so we'll open up, we'll have dinner and we can keep talking.
I have a point
Yes.
regarding proof.
this is something which came up in an earlier discussion, that proof sometimes is available to only a very small subset of people, and the rest of us just go about believing it. For example, the Large Hadron Collider, the boson particle and all those things. None of us in this room have access to that equipment. But since it was published in some scientific study, we all go about believing it. So the same way, there are a few people who have had absolute access to the spiritual knowledge and the outcomes of it. So that's a proof. They have described their experiments, they have described their outcomes. So we believe what three scientists came up with.
So,
And the difference is, in our case, they're inviting us to also experience the same thing. We wouldn't get access to Argonne National Laboratory or whatever like that, unless we are, in that pursuit of that science. But in the spiritual science, anybody is open. Anybody can try it out and experience it for themselves. At least in the Vedic perspective, there's no discrimination of anything. One can be even in coma, and one is still not disqualified to experience spiritual life, because it deals with the soul, not the body. So it's actually a more open and honest system, where one can, like I said, because it's a personal experience, one has to be sincere enough to at least take the first step and try it out.
Actually, there are people from different religion or different
We'll
beliefs.
serve food.